Bula Vinaka, everyone. Welcome to today's Explainer. I am so incredibly glad you're here with us. Iyo, go ahead and grab your bilo, settle in, maybe imagine we're just sitting under the shade of a big mango tree. Because today, we're having a really relaxed talanoa, a good open conversation about something that actually affects every single one of us, whether we realize it or not. We're talking about systems. We interact with them every single day. But what happens when they break down, or when they simply stop serving our communities the way they were meant to? Today, we're going to look closely at what's called the systems life cycle, and we'll use a very real-world example from right here in Fiji to guide us along the way.
Think about this for a second. How do we fix a system that leaves people behind? Let me share the story of VidiBank. Now, VidiBank is growing fast, and it's doing very well, but there's a pretty serious problem. Our rural customers, who are truly the heart of our communities, are finding it incredibly difficult to access basic banking services. We're talking about folks having to travel for days, sometimes even weeks, just to reach a physical branch location. That is a whole lot of time away from their families and their farms. Clearly, the current way of doing things just isn't working for everyone anymore. So how do we actually solve this? Well, we don't just guess. We use a structured process.
But before we go trying to fix anything, let's make sure we understand what we're actually dealing with. What is a system, anyway? It's simply a collection of activities and elements organized to accomplish a specific task. If you think about an information system, it's a combination of things: hardware, software, the people, procedures, data, and the internet, all needing to work together in harmony. But here's the catch. Communities change over time. Organizations grow, brand new technologies emerge, and because of all that, systems absolutely have to evolve too. When they don't, well, that's exactly when you get farmers walking for days just to deposit their hard-earned money.
So, to navigate all these changes without causing absolute chaos, systems analysts use a clear, step-by-step map called the systems lifecycle. It's made up of 6 distinct phases: preliminary investigation, system analysis, system design, system development, system implementation, and finally, system maintenance. Today, to keep things simple, we're going to focus purely on the very beginning of this journey, just phases 1 and 2.
Let's dive right into phase 1, which is the preliminary investigation. This is all about taking that crucial first step to truly understand the need. This phase usually kicks off because someone in the community raises their hand and says, "Keta, we need something new here, something we aren't currently doing." During this preliminary investigation, a systems analyst really has 3 specific jobs to do. They need to briefly define the problem, suggest some alternative solutions, and then prepare a short report. Let's see how this actually played out for the folks at VidiBank.
Right, so task 1 is defining the problem. And let's be honest, you can't fix what you don't fully understand. Defining the problem means really looking at whatever current information system is being used. The analyst asks questions like, what information is actually needed? By whom? When do they need it, and why? They figure this all out by going directly out into the community, making careful observations and having honest conversations, really interviewing people. For VidiBank, the analyst stepped in, looked at how fast they were growing, and pinpointed exactly why those rural customers were struggling. The problem wasn't that the bank lacked money or resources, it was the physical accessibility of the service itself.
Once that problem is clearly defined, we move on to task 2, which is suggesting alternative solutions. Let's look at the contrast here. On one hand, we have the old, incredibly frustrating arrangement, our rural customers making those long, exhausting journeys. But what if we flip that? Instead of the people coming to the bank, what if we take the bank directly to the people? The suggested alternative is mobile rural banking, brought right to their very doorsteps. This completely changes the game. Suddenly, services are readily available, and people actually bank more because they don't have to wait or travel. It's a beautiful example of how redesigning a system isn't just about computers and wires. It's about genuinely making life better for the people we care about.
And that brings us to the third task of phase 1. You've got this great idea, but you need support to make it happen. For large projects like this, the analyst writes up a short report summarizing everything they've uncovered and suggesting these brilliant new alternatives. This report goes straight up to higher management with a recommendation to either keep going or stop the project right there. Management then decides if they're going to open the purse strings and actually finance the next step. For VidiBank, the mobile banking idea was so incredibly strong that they easily got the green light to move forward.
Getting that approval brings us beautifully right into phase 2, systems analysis. This is where we start digging a lot deeper into the data.
Just a quick point of clarification before we go any further. We are not designing those new mobile banking trucks or writing any software just yet. We are simply collecting data to figure out what the new requirements will be. Just like in the first phase, phase 2 is built on 3 core tasks: gathering data, analyzing that data, and documenting the analysis in a comprehensive report. Let's keep our Talanoa flowing and look at how the analysts tackled this to help those remote VD Bank customers.
Task 1 is gathering data. Here, the analyst expands on absolutely everything they learned back in the first phase. They want the fine, granular details of how the current system works day to day. At VD Bank, they handed out detailed questionnaires to the rural customers and the bank employees. They actively interviewed the IT department to see exactly what technology was already in place. They observed the daily operations of the bank firsthand. It's all about listening, watching carefully, and putting together a complete, honest picture of the situation. And it's not just talking to people either. Analysts also dive deep into the paperwork, looking at things like organizational charts. They do this because an organizational chart shows the levels of management and the formal lines of authority. You have to truly understand the rules and the structure of the village, so to speak, before you can ever successfully introduce a new way of doing things.
Then comes task 2, analyzing the data. This is where we apply some clear logic to learn how information currently flows and pinpoint exactly where it might be getting stuck. Now, here's a really fascinating point. Sometimes, after doing all this rigorous analysis, you might realize the system doesn't actually need to be redesigned at all. Sometimes you find out people just aren't following the prescribed procedures, and all they really need is some proper training. It's a hugely important check to do before spending a massive amount of money. But in VD Bank's case, to get all the way out to those rural areas, a real system change was definitely required.
To do all this analysis properly, analysts rely on a wonderful toolkit. They use checklists, which give them guiding questions for key issues. They use top-down analysis, which is just taking a big, complex system and breaking it down into smaller, easy-to-manage pieces. They use grid charts to see the relationship between what goes into a system and the documents that come out of it. And they use systems flowcharts to trace the actual physical flow of data in the current manual system. Having the right tools like this just makes the heavy lifting so much easier.
Now, it's super important to note the difference between the types of flowcharts here. A system flowchart gives a broad, overarching view. It describes the present manual or non-computerized system and the general flow of daily life inside the bank. A program flowchart, on the other hand, is a highly detailed chart that gets used much later on for actual computer programming. Right now, in Phase 2, we are purely focused on the broader system flowchart to understand the big picture. Sarada, that's probably enough heavy technical detail for the moment. Let's look at how we wrap this phase up. Task 3 neatly finishes off Phase 2. And just like the very first phase, everything concludes with careful, thorough documentation. The analyst takes all this beautifully gathered and analyzed data and compiles it into a comprehensive report. This report is basically the foundation of everything moving forward. It clearly defines the requirements for the new system. In our case, exactly what VD Bank is going to need to make that mobile rural banking a true reality when they get to the later phases of design and implementation.
And that brings us to the end of our journey for today. We've seen firsthand how understanding systems isn't just about computers and data. It's fundamentally about solving real problems for real people, like taking a fully functioning bank directly to a rural village. So, I want to leave you with this thought. Look around your own community right now. What system do you think needs a Phase 1 investigation today? What could be working just a little bit better for the people around you? Thank you so much for joining me under the mango tree for this explainer. Vinaka Vakalevu for your time, your wonderful focus, and your company today. Until next time, Moche Mata.